Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, along with my cohort in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It is great to be here, and I'm excited to introduce our next guest, who is the best-selling author of, I believe, over 31 books. Is it now, Reed?
33.
33 books, and
But who's counting?
Yeah, I was trying to.
And you see back here?
Yes, look at those.
Oh, those, yes.
Isn't that fabulous? So, yes, he's a best-selling author. He's won many awards. He has been nominated oodles of times for the Edgar and other. I mean, he's done it all. He's got it all. And so I'd love to introduce Reed Farrel Coleman. Welcome to Get to Know, Reed.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Oh, it is our pleasure for sure. And I want to kick off this interview with asking you about your childhood. Feel free to recline on a couch if you need to. And what I want to know is, do you think that your childhood contributed to you becoming a writer? Were you an introverted child, an extroverted child? Did you have imaginary friends? Tell us about it.
Let's see. It may not have contributed to my authorship, but it certainly contributed to my psychosis.
Well, let's dig into that.
No, actually, I don't know an author who could say that their childhood didn't have an effect on them becoming an author. For me, when I've been asked that question, I thought about it a lot. And I grew up in a very angry household. We loved each other, but it was a very angry household, and we communicated by screaming at each other. I kid you not. We communicated everything, including love, through anger and screaming. And of course, when everybody is screaming, no one hears anything. And I think I started writing poetry, which is how I first got published, as a way to be heard above the din. And so directly in my family, I would say that my childhood in some ways directly led to me finding a way to express myself other than screaming.
So did you do sports? Were you introverted or extroverted? And did you have any angry imaginary friends?
I had very many imaginary friends. No, I was extroverted. I've always been I was always the kid who volunteered to go first in speech class to get it out of the way. I think I have my author friend Peter Spiegelman always says, some of us have the internal stand-up and are just the kind of person who can stand up in front of a crowd and never be scared. In fact, I'm a golfer, and people are always shocked at, you stand on the first tee, and some people are very intimidated by taking their first swing of the day in front of other people. And that stuff has just never bothered me. I always turn around to my golfing partners and say, I've appeared in front of thousands of people. Swinging a golf club is not the thing that scares me. So the long answer is, yeah, I've always been kind of extroverted.
So what does scare you?
Spiders. No. No, what scares me? Heights scare me. I've been saying this is someone who worked in the World Trade Center, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, but only on the 25th floor.
But still.
Yeah, still, yeah.
So you're saying you didn't walk up to the window and look down?
I did, and it scared the hell out of me. It was not good. Even when I watch movies, that show like drone shots and stuff like that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It really bothers. Now, flying doesn't bother me at all.
Interesting.
But standing on a roof, get at the top of a ladder. Yeah, needless to say, I have never cleaned my own gutters.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a good excuse not to have to do that.
Yeah.
Cleaning gutters is never fun.
Except when you get the bill.
Yeah. Well,
So
you
I
started
want
with poetry. How did you get over to
yeah.
more narrative fiction, and
Well,
how did that process come about?
that's a good question. How did I go? Well, if you want to, I have this saying, if you want to be poor, be a writer. If you want to be destitute, be a poet. Uh, Poetry tends to pay you in extra copies if they pay you anything at all. And unless you're going to eat the pulp of the paper for extra fiber, it doesn't really pay much. When I went to Brooklyn College, Allen Ginsberg, John Ashbery, David Lehman, Edward Albee all taught there. And if those people had to teach to survive, I knew poetry was not the way to go.
Oh wow.
So really, the story goes that I had always believed I would write poetry and have a normal job. I mean,
Sure.
there's a lot of precedent for that. Wallace Stevens was an insurance broker. William Carlos Williams was a general practitioner. T.S. Eliot was a bank clerk. So I thought, and that's what happened. I got out of college. I was on the 7-year plan, by the way.
That's a
I
serious
got,
entertainment plan there.
I got out of college. I got a job in the transport company working in the World Trade Center. I continued to write poetry and get it published. I was transferred to the cargo area at Kennedy Airport. There's a point to this story, I swear. And have you ever seen the movie Goodfellas?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are the people I work with. They were all named Vinny.
Wow.
Yeah, it was we had a saying, if it fell off the truck on Tuesday, we were wearing it on Wednesday. So so once a week I had to go into Manhattan from the airport for meetings. And there were hours to kill between the time my office job at the airport was over and the meetings happened. So I went back to Brooklyn College and took a night class. And it was American detective fiction. And
Oh.
it was the only, I was kind of interested in it, and I had never been a crime reader. Like, to me, crime novels were always the kind of cheesy paperback books on my dad's nightstands with, lurid covers of half-dressed women holding guns. So it was never like something that interested me. And I took this class, and the first 3 books we read were The Continental Op by Dashiell Hammett, Farewell, My Lovely by Raymond Chandler, and The Maltese Falcon. And on that night, when we were done discussing those books, I came home and told my wife, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to write detective novels. And my wife, twice has said yes to me in her life and has deeply regretted it both times. Once when I said, will you marry me? And once when I said, is it okay for me to quit my job and write detective novels? And she said yes, both times. And so that's how I made the switch from poetry to detective fiction. And 2.5 years later, my first full-length novel was published as my first book, Life Goes Sleeping.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So, Doug and I have both studied under an author by the name of Bryce Courtney, who's an Australian author. And he would ask, what's your mongrel? And that was Aussie speak for, what is it that all of your books boil down to that you like to explore? For me, it's moral bankruptcy. What would you say all of your books boil down to? What's the thing that really sticks in your craw?
Well, moral bankruptcy, is that a portrait of me? Well,
I think you'd have to answer that.
We'll leave that to the reader to decide.
Yeah.
Well, you guys know me. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Even though we don't admit it in public, yes.
Well, same for you guys.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Lyle? Doug Lyle? Who's that?
Yeah, never heard of it.
Yeah. I would say the overriding theme of all of my books, when you chisel all the rest away, is it is impossible to know yourself. So how the hell can you possibly know anybody else?
Oh, I love that. Very interesting. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's always been, whenever you see it never fails. And I'm a New Yorker, so you get this a lot. You know, recently we had these serial killings on Long Island, the Gilgo Beach murderers,
Yeah.
9 bodies found tucked away on the beach that have been there for a while. And of course, they finally, after like 20 years, they've arrested the guy who they believe did it. And you know, it's the old thing. I can't believe he did that. He could,
Exactly.
she could never have done that. He always said hello, you know, that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, I understand why people say it, but when you hear someone say he could never have done that, it's like, oh yes, he could have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you could have, or I could have. I always
Right.
believe people don't realize if you get deprived of sleep or meals for a week, let's see what you would do. So that's kind of the theme of my
We
book.
all have a shadow side.
Kind of Lord of the Flies. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. At the end of the day, it's Lord of the Flies.
Some of us have more shadows than others.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've written a lot of different series, but and some great characters, great novels, and obviously been respected and nominated and all of that stuff for a long, 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 long time. And but you got into writing Just Stone, the Robert B. Parker character. How did that come about, and what were the trials and tribulations of stepping into that world of such an iconic character with a iconic writer and kind of protecting that, but yet making it fresh? How did you do all
Yeah.
that?
That's a great question. Um, you know, someone comes to you and says, your agent calls you up and says, there's this iconic series by one of the most famous writers in American history. You want to do it? And
Yeah.
of course, it took me a nanosecond to say yes. But of course, after I said yes, it was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So
Were you terrified? I would have been terrified.
I wasn't
Yeah.
terrified, and that's like, I'm kind of, as writers go, I'm kind of fearless as a
That's
writer.
awesome. Yeah.
Because I think I'd have to say writers have to be fearless. It's okay to be cautious, but you have to be fearless because, you know, otherwise you get pap. You produce
Mhm.
pap. So I went back and read the books, and I sought out advice of 3 people, none of whom was my rabbi, but I saw, okay, S.J. Roseanne,
Mm,
because
Yeah.
had been kind of a mentor to me.
yeah, she's
Um,
fabulous.
yeah, and she basically said, yes, do it. Ace Atkins,
Mhm.
who did the Spencer series, so I figured he said, you know, he had some really good advice for me. But the strangest thing is the last person I went to had the kind of best advice for me, and that's an author named Tom Schreck. He's an upstate New York author. He's a New York State Athletic Commission boxing judge. He does
Oh,
animal rescue, and he's the world's biggest Elvis Presley fan. Okay. And that actually plays into this because you know, he was a big Parker fan, and I knew that, and that's why I sought out his advice. And in seeking out his advice, he said to me, you know, I'm a big Elvis Presley fan. I said, Tom, have you been drinking? I know you like bourbon. Like, what does one have to do with the other? And he
yeah.
said, the best thing to me, he said, you know, I've seen the best Elvis impersonators in the world. And there's 2 things you can never get over. One is they're not Elvis. No
Mhm.
matter how good they are, they're not Elvis. And the second thing is they can never do anything new. So they're trapped into always doing Elvis's repertoire. And
Mm.
so the minute he said that to me, like a bulb went, you know, something clicked. And I said, okay, I'm not going to try and imitate Bob Parker. I'm going to be true to the characters.
Mhm.
Of course, you have to do that. You have to be, the characters can't suddenly, you know, convert to Judaism And, they can't, Jesse Stone can't change his name to Jesse Stein. You can't do that to your characters. So you have to be true to your characters, but your style doesn't have to be Bob Parker's style. So once I made that decision, any of the trepidation kind of disappeared, and the results were very good. I mean, all 6 that I did
Yeah.
were on the New York Times bestseller list. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, so, and it was great while I did it. It got my name out there in a bigger way. And once your name is on the bestseller list, they can't take
They can't take it away from you.
Yep,
That's
yep.
right.
That's right.
though they may try.
They may try. Yes.
Yep. Yep. Oh my gosh. So what are you currently working on?
Let's see. This is shameless self-promotion, right?
Go for it.
Yes.
Okay. So my most recent novel is Sleepless City. It's the beginning of a new series. It came out last year. And it is a character who's kind of like an urban James Bond. He's the city's shadow warrior, New York City's shadow warrior. He's a detective by day and is the city's fixer by night. And the second book in the series, Blind to Midnight, comes out August 13th.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, so we're gearing up for that.
I love this cover.
Yeah, and the second cover is similar to this.
Gorgeous cover. Of
he
course,
won't be
the eye candy of the gentleman isn't bad either.
Well, you know how many people have asked me for his number?
Yes.
Male and female have asked me for his
I am
number.
single.
Yeah.
Great profile.
Now, Blind to Midnight is out or it's coming out?
It's coming out August 13th.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
You can see my picture's not on the book, but his is certainly popular. Look at
He is James Bond, isn't he?
Shaken, not stirred.
and it was a departure in character because most of my characters previously I would characterize as stumblers, people who were good at their job and then became private detectives and without training, so they kind of stumbled around. And those are easier characters to write because you can put them in dangerous situations where they shouldn't be. They're in situations that because they don't know any better. They contact people who maybe they shouldn't contact the way they contact and get into situations that are dangerous. Whereas Nick Ryan, the character in Sleepless City and Blind to Midnight, is very competent at his job. He's uber competent, which is why he gets this job as the city's fixer, which he takes reluctantly, by the way. And it is much harder to write a competent character than a stumbler. And that was a great challenge. But there's that fearlessness thing. It's like you give me a challenge and let me have at it. And that was, so that's where Nick came out of.
Is it hard to write the antagonist against him because he's so competent? So you have to have really a bad guy that's a challenge for even him, right?
Yeah, well, I just imagined Doug Lyle as the bad guy.
I've heard that before. I'm trying to figure it out.
No, actually, I think if you ask most crime writers, they would say the fun part is the antagonist.
Sure.
The hard part is the protagonist. Like for me, it's the antagonist, since they're not limited by their morality, are kind of easier and more fun to write. And the more evil, the more three-dimensional, the better for me. So I have kind of more fun. In the first book, in Sleepless City, one of the antagonists is a kind of Alex Jonesy type of character who manipulates people in really evil ways. So
oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So
Well, that's an interesting point you made about how difficult it is to write I haven't really thought of it that way before, but in my Kane Harper series, Kane and Harper are extremely competent and they're fearless and they don't make mistakes. They're well trained, they're well prepared and all that. And so you really got to come up with scenarios and bad guys who do things either extremely clever or extremely unexpected. And therefore
yeah,
that puts them under pressure. On the other hand, with Jake, my Jake's here, Jake's an idiot. So he wanders into stuff all the time. And so you don't have to be that clever to get Jake in trouble.
right.
That's an
Right. You see
interesting
what I
point.
mean? Yeah, when they're stumblers or they're idiots, it's like, okay, man,
Yeah.
you can't help that. That's the easy stuff because they're always stumbling into places they shouldn't
Exactly.
go. They're saying things they shouldn't say to the wrong people,
Right.
you know. So yeah, so Maureen Corrigan from NPR read Sleepless City and said, I kept wondering, you put him in such tight situations because he's so competent. And
Mhm.
she would say, and everything was, I wondered how you would get him out of this.
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
the kind of situations he gets into, Nick gets into, are much more complex and arcane and dangerous than the things that, let's say, Mo Prager from one of my other series
Right.
would get
Mhm.
in. So, you know, it's kind of fun because I raised the stakes for myself that way.
Well, are you an outliner or a pantser or how would you
Oh, I'm a
describe yourself?
pantser. I'm a
Yeah.
pantser.
How much do you know about the story when you started though? I mean, what in your head, what have you thought about, you know?
Uh, you know, that's I don't think I've ever written two books exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm
Mhm.
even a pantser in process sometimes.
Mm.
There are some books, like there's a Mo Prager book. I think it was called Innocent Monster. No, Hurt Machine.
Mhm.
It's like the six Mo Prager novel. And all I had when I sat down to write was Mo is sick. That's
Wow.
all I had. That was the idea. So, and it was funny in that I had to find the plot to meet that while I was writing it.
Right.
I had
Mhm.
to find a plot. And it by good fortune, as it always works out. And I often use this example when I teach classes about how to take stories from the headlines and make them into fiction. New York, when I was writing the book, two EMTs were eating lunch in Manhattan, and a pregnant woman stumbles into the restaurant and was having a severe asthma attack.
Mhm.
Now, it was misreported that the EMTs didn't help her. They weren't by their bus, they weren't by their ambulance, and didn't have their equipment. But so they called for another ambulance, and by the time that ambulance got there, she and the baby died. It's a tragic story.
Mm.
Mm.
But that's not a book, right?
Right.
That's a tragedy. 3 months later, one of those EMTs was murdered in Brooklyn.
That's a
Oh.
book.
That's a
Yep.
book, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that second EMT was murdered while I started writing Hurt Machine. So there was the plot to the book. I mean,
Like
that's
manna from heaven.
yeah,
Yes.
that's how freewheeling it can be when I sit down to write a
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
like what you said. It always works out because my first 10 books I outlined and it was hard work. I quit doing that and I have an idea, maybe a couple of scenes, maybe a concept and just start writing. It always works out.
Right,
It
because you're
always
built
works
that
out.
way. You know, you're built that way to write. You can
Yeah.
write a book that way. I've built this way. This is,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
Mhm.
whenever I have tried to outline,
Yeah.
I'm bored
I
because
get bored so
written,
fast.
I've already written the book already. Why would I
Right.
want to write it again? So yeah, it's my theory has always been if I'm not sure what's happening next and it excites me, then it'll excite the reader who's
Yes.
not
Mhm.
sure what's
Mhm.
happening next.
Excellent.
But some people aren't built that way. And you know, Jeffrey, we both know Jeffrey
Yeah.
Deaver,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
who writes these voluminous, you know, single spaced
Right.
outlines, you
Yeah.
know, um, and it works for him, right? Whatever works.
Exactly.
I'm a big outliner, and I almost think they're basically my first draft. So in a way, it's like your outline is kind of, you're pantsing it, and then, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I do find, you have to stay flexible, because as you get to know those characters, they tend to do things differently than they would have, when you're first getting to know them in an outline. But I think it can make you can get bored. You can
Well,
get
even when
tired.
I outlined, the outline never stayed intact.
Right,
It
right.
always got damaged and twisted and turned and lopped off, and it
Yeah.
always became something, a different animal, because once you get into the writing, story's going to take you somewhere.
Yeah, I've always let the story take me where it's going.
Mhm.
And I don't put down outlining, because if it
No.
works, it
Yeah.
produces great books for some
Yeah.
people. It wouldn't produce for me. Like, people say, how many drafts do you do? And I tend to do one draft, but I have edited that one draft while I'm writing it a
Mhm.
1,000 times. I
Sure.
mean, never, from 1 hour to the next, things are never the same in the book. Things are tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. So
Yeah.
my one draft has been edited many, many times.
Yep.
Yeah. So, looking back at your career and starting out as a poet, if you could give yourself one piece of advice that you wish you had known then, what would it be?
Stay in the air freight business.
I do get that.
Uh, I'm not a regretter. Okay.
Mhm.
My career, whenever I get down about my career, and we all get down about our careers. If you ask Lee Child, there have been times when he's gotten down about everybody gets down about their careers. I always think, and you go to these conventions. Yeah, I know I go to Thriller Fest. Sometimes you guys go a lot. I always go to BoucherCon, and you see people who would give their right arm to have half of your career,
Right.
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And it always reminds me that I've had a better career than 99.9% of the people who ever say, I want to be a mystery writer.
Mhm.
So I don't regret. I mean, the career, just like how I write books, my career has worked out because it just has.
Sure.
And it occurs to me that I should be very pleased with, look, I mean, look who I'm speaking to, right?
Ah, look who we're speaking to,
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So
But you're right. You have to be very grateful about this. First of all,
Mhm.
that you had that concept, and I think virtually everybody on the planet wishes they could write a book, but you actually said, okay, I'm going to sit down and do it, and then actually did it.
Mhm.
And I always tell students that if you complete a manuscript, you're an author. You have authored something. Otherwise, you're a writer, and that's okay. But that next level, I just use those terms loosely like that. Once you complete a manuscript, it doesn't matter if it ever sees the light of day. You have done something. Be
Mhm.
proud.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when I've taught writing, I've said to people, the key component is sitting your tush down and writing. Like,
Yes.
do it. Like, if I had $1 for every time someone said, I want to write a book,
Yep.
uh, I could buy myself lunch. No,
Yeah.
we've all heard this a
Yes.
Oh,
thousand
yeah.
times. Well, okay, 10 minutes a day, sit down,
Mhm.
give yourself
Mhm.
a goal of 1 page a day, and write every day, even if it's 15 minutes, and you'll have a 365-page book.
Yeah. And if you
So,
start with 10 minutes, you'll end up there and suddenly you'll be 2 hours later. That
right.
happens
Right.
all the time.
Flies by.
I lose track of time when I'm
Yeah,
writing,
exactly.
Yeah.
always.
Well,
Always.
Kathy earlier mentioned Bryce Courtney, and Bryce famously said, "What it takes to write is bum glue. Glue your
Yep.
bum to the chair and write." And that's the very Aussie way of saying it. But yeah, it's exactly right. You got to do the job. Sit down, get to work. It'll take care of
Right.
itself.
Yeah, and you know, people, yes, I love when people ask me about writer's block.
Yeah.
And I always say that that's some romantic notion. Now there are days when I sit
Yeah.
down and crap comes, it's crappy,
Right.
but I wrote, right?
Mhm.
I
Exactly.
did the job. You know,
Yeah.
I often say, do pathologists get pathology block? You know, oh, you know, I can't do autopsies today. I can't look at slides today. I have pathology.
Right.
You know, there's a
I'm not
garbage
feeling it.
man. Does the garbage man get, you know, trash bin block? You know, it's your job, right?
Yeah.
It's my job. That doesn't mean I'm going to love everything that comes out when I write, but I write every day. So
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
That's a
So
great
true.
point. That's a great point.
Reed Farrel Coleman, it's been such a pleasure having you. You are a great interview. We've got to have you back. You're just a terrific guy. Thank you so very, very much.
oh, I'll see you tomorrow. No, it was,
Perfect.
it was great. It was really lots of fun. And, you know, sitting around and chatting is always great. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
Yes. And I also want to ask our viewers to please click the thumbs up. It helps with the algorithms and gets the interviews out. And if you like what we're doing here on Get to Know, please click the subscribe button. Again, it helps us grow our channel and bring more interviews to you. Doug?
And that ends this episode of Get to Know here on the Outliers YouTube channel. And we really thank Reed, a good friend, a great writer. Go check his stuff out. You will love it. So until next time, this is Get to Know on the Outliers YouTube channel. We'll be back, as you know, with more interviews and more programming. So until then.